In today's video, you're going to see how I almost ruined the top of this vintage dresser. Here's the piece when I picked it up. The top was a little bit dry and it had some normal wear and tear, and some of the finish was coming off, but nothing unusual for a vintage piece of furniture. Overall, the set was in really beautiful condition. It was a 3-piece set plus a mirror. And the people we bought it from were really sweet. In fact, the lady actually gave me a hug when we were leaving, even though I just met her. I started as I normally do, cleaning the piece with some simple green, and this was some of the cleanest furniture that I have ever bought. It was obvious that the previous owners really took pride in caring for these beautiful pieces. So I wanted to gently sand down the top a little bit where the wood finish was coming off. I started with my hand sander and 120 grit sandpaper just to kind of see how much of it was going to come off and how much sanding I thought it was going to need. After going over it a couple times, I went ahead and grabbed my orbital sander and gave it a thorough sanding. However, I did not sand all the way down to bare wood across the entire top of the dresser. I'd recently watched a video about using gel stain, and I thought that that might be a good solution for this piece of furniture. So this is where things start to go really wrong. I just wasn't thinking clearly. The first thing I had to do was really thoroughly stir the gel stain. It was a little bit clumpy, and I had to check the directions a couple times to make sure that I was using it correctly. But once I got it stirred and smoothed out, I started to apply it to the end of the dresser to test it out. I used a chip brush to put on a thin layer of gel stain. And now my understanding of gel stain is that you apply a thin layer, let it sit for a few minutes, and then wipe it back off. Rather than penetrating the wood, it sits on top of the wood or the existing finish, and it allows you to build the color as you go. So you can wipe most of it off for a subtle look, or you can add additional layers for a darker look. So at this point, everything was still going okay. I was just doing this one end of the dresser, and when I wiped it off, things were looking good. Not fantastic, but I thought pretty good for a first layer. Now, here's where the more experienced furniture refinishers are probably shaking their head and saying, "Oh my God, what is she doing?" I don't know why I didn't think this through, but when I applied the gel stain where I had sanded down to raw wood and the area surrounding it, where I still had some of the former finish, I don't know why I thought I was going to get a consistent color. Just wait until you see what this did. I am so sad. I was so depressed, and I couldn't believe that I had done this. And I'm learning as I go through trial and error, and this was one of the times that, well, it was an error, and it did not work out for me. The stain had soaked into the raw wood and left it terribly blotchy. So I quickly grabbed the closest bottle of cleaner I could find, sprayed down the entire top of the dresser, and tried to remove as much of the gel stain as I could before it dried and set into the wood. After letting the remaining stain dry, I once again grabbed my orbital sander, and this time I sanded down the entire top of the dresser to raw wood, so I would be able to get a consistent finish. I also used a wood conditioner. This is an oil-based wood conditioner, and this is supposed to help condition the wood so that when you apply the stain, you get a more even coat and you don't get the blotchiness. So hopefully this is going to work. Now you do have to let this dry very thoroughly. So while the wood conditioner was drying, I decided to try the gel technique one more time, but this time I didn't do any sanding. The drawers and the body of the furniture were in beautiful condition. So I went ahead and just put a light layer of the gel stain, which is the color Kona, and I put it over the original walnut stain, and I didn't let it sit for any significant length of time. Once I had a thorough coat, I came back in with a soft rag and wiped it off. And it worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. It just kind of filled in scratches. It gave it a slightly darker tone, and it gave it a much richer color than the original walnut finish had. So this is what I had hoped would happen on the top, but it was unsuccessful. However, it worked extremely well on the drawers and on the body of both of the pieces. Actually, all of the pieces. This is what I had hoped would happen. I'm brushing it on, making sure I get a thorough coverage of the gel stain, just a light coat, and then once it's on, I come back in with a soft rag and wipe it off, just leaving a light layer of the color. If you look at the right side of the dresser where I've already done the 3 drawers and now the middle section that I'm working on, you can see how it's a subtle color change. It's just adding a richer, darker tone that I think really accents the design of this piece and is going to make it look fantastic. Now there was one section of the entire set that needed to be repaired. So I grabbed my QuickWood and I cut off a small piece of it and rubbed it together to activate the epoxy. And then I used it to gently fill in the area where there were some scratches. I don't remember seeing this when we looked at it in the person's home, so we may have damaged it when we transported it to our house. But either way, this is a simple fix, and once the QuickWood is dried, we'll be able to come in and sand it down, and we're really keeping the authentic 1970s look of this piece. Now, as a furniture refinisher, I really like using QuickWood whenever I have to do a repair and I'm wanting to do a quick furniture flip because it dries super fast, and then you're able to come in with a hand sander or your electric sander, sand it down, and then get it ready to paint or stain or whatever you're doing with the finish. To color match to the area around it, I decided to use a spray can of walnut stain, and I used some cardboard to protect the area around it. I sprayed the entire front piece of trim so that it would all match, and just let that dry before moving on to the next steps with the gel stain and eventually a top coat. There was one area that was badly scratched on the top of the bureau, so before applying the gel stain, I grabbed my wood paint kit to repair it. I pulled some different colors of paint that were in the dresser, and I started applying them with a paintbrush. This is where you build the colors in layers. This product does dry really fast, so I always keep a little bit of water handy so I can dip my paintbrush in it when needed. And I just keep going in the direction of the paint grain and add colors. I start with a base color that's a little bit lighter than the piece of furniture, and then I start coming in with the darker colors. Learning to do this does take some practice, and there have been many times where I painted on some wood grain and then completely removed it and started over. So give yourself some grace if you try to do this. The paint will be noticeable until you finish with your final top coat. Unfortunately, I forgot to record myself staining the top of the dresser, but I did make a mistake in one area that I had to go back in and sand down and then build up the color using layers of stain. I used a combination of Walnut and Kona to stain the top of this. And once I had that area finished, I came in with a spray can of walnut to help even out. I applied this in small bursts to help blend the area that I had gone back and refinished to get it to match the entire top of the dresser. Just use little spurts to build up the color and let it dry, and you can always come back in and add more. So the stain is still wet, but you can kind of see, if you look really closely, where the two areas meet. But I'm going to take care of that in a couple more steps. Same thing with the top of the bureau. You can see where I did the paint repair, and now I'm going to come in with a toner. The toner I'm going to use is in the color Kona. Toner has a much lower concentration of stain, so it doesn't leave a solid color. You apply small amounts of it. I kind of applied it a little heavy there because it was a little bit lighter, but you just want to do small amounts of it. Let it dry, and then same thing. If you need to come back in and add more, you can until you get the color that you want and you don't have the blotchiness. You want to wear your respirator when using any type of an aerosol to keep your lungs safe, and I also wear glasses to protect my eyes. Make sure you're being safe. I noticed a couple little spots where some dust or something had landed on the dresser. So before toning and doing my top coat, I grabbed some brown paper bag, which is the equivalent of a high grit sandpaper, and sanded it down just to make sure that I had a nice, smooth, perfect finish for the toner and the top coat. It's kind of hard to tell in the video, but the toner does a really good job of just evening out any of the blotchiness and helping blend areas where maybe two different colors are meeting, or it's just not as smooth as you want, but it doesn't leave a solid color that hides the wood grain. So just use little light spurts. You don't want to overdo it. You build the color as you go, and you can always come back and add more. I wanted to keep this piece as authentic as possible, so I kept the original hardware. I also didn't want to clean them completely. I wanted to keep some of the aged patina look. So what I did is I used some Barkeeper's Friend, and I put a little on a rag, and then I just scrubbed kind of the top layer of buildup off of them so that that original beautiful brass hardware could come through and keep a little bit of an aged look. I think it's going to look gorgeous, and it's going to maintain that mid-century modern look and feel. Here you can kind of see the difference between one I've cleaned and one I haven't cleaned yet. All right, guys, we made it. I was really scared for a while, but I didn't think we were going to get there. So now I'm ready to put on my top coats, and I'm going to use Polycrylic in a warm satin. I've had this can for a while, so after stirring it, I went ahead and put it through a paint strainer so that I could make sure and get any impurities out of it. I just use a little paint filter, put it into another container, and then that way I make sure that I don't get any clumpiness or do any damage to the stain that I worked so hard to get onto these dressers. I like to put my top coat on with a little sponge, and I will put all of my product information in the descriptions for you. It's interesting here because it looks like the dresser that I'm top coating is much lighter than the bureau in the background. And that little small dresser on the left is from a different set. They actually do match in real life. I think it's just the shadow from the top of the tent that's making the bureau look a little bit darker. So when you apply your top coat, do nice long strokes going in the direction of the grain. I typically apply 3 coats of polycrylic to the top of each of my pieces and 2 coats to the side. Oh, and here we go. So this looks very similar to where we started, but the scratches are gone, the flaking is gone, and it's a little bit deeper, darker tone. I hope you love it. I think it has a very classic mid-century modern feel. It's just a little bit richer and darker than it was when I got it. I had hoped this would be an easy flip, but it ended up being a little more work. However, it did sell very quickly. Now I want to give you some sneak peeks into some of the other projects that I'm working on. I am recording my progress, and I'll be posting videos soon. I really appreciate all my subscribers, and I hope you like and share with your friends.